You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network and the John Fredericks Radio app, and thanks for being with us today. I am your Godzilla of the truth in America, trucking it every day. Rick Fisher with us, renowned expert on China. He's on the line right now. Dr. Fisher, great to have you. It's been way too long, sir.
John, thanks for having me on, and congratulations on your new radio station.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Rick. I appreciate that. Plus, we're launching a new digital news site in Virginia, Virginia Star. Go to virginiastar.com. That'll be launching on August 17th. Thank you, Rick, for that. And I want to thank Colonel Mike for reminding you we're the worst at getting our guests on because we get so many inquiries that call in. And Colonel Mike was like, when are you going to get Rick Fisher on again? I'm like, oh, my God, he should be on like all the time. So, look, Rick, I only got a couple minutes, but, you know, you've been talking about these issues in China since I've been on the air for 10 years, not Johnny come lately. You've been talking about this, what's going on here for 10 years. Steve Bannon yesterday, amazing, calling for the president to basically sanction everything. It's sanction all their leaders' money in the United States, get rid of their access of cash from Hong Kong, freeze all their accounts, not let them do business here all over this virus. But yet they hold a huge portion of our debt. Plus they're expanding in the South China Sea. Now we've got ships from NATO actually going there. Sum this up for us, Rick.
Well, John, President Trump, God bless him, has finally decided to defend the United States from the Chinese Communist Party. In my youth, towards the end of the cold, hot war with the former Soviet Union, we learned the hard way that we had to take a range of measures to isolate the Soviet Union, to constrain its access to foreign technology, and to meet it militarily in order to convince that leadership they would gain nothing from major aggression against the democracies. The United States, under President Trump, is beginning to steer in that direction. What will come of it has yet to be determined. How quickly we move to a position where we can effectively defend ourselves from the predations of the Chinese Communist Party remains to be seen. I'm sure many of your listeners are waking up to the news that on Tuesday, the United States ordered China to close its consulate in Houston, gave them 72 hours to vacate the consulate. This is a very strong signal, an action actually, that tells the Chinese Communist Party leadership that no, we're not going to take it anymore. We're not going to let Chinese operatives and semi-operatives roll all over this country, coordinated from Chinese consulates. This is a big day. Yes, it raises tension. Yes, it makes clear that our economic dependence on China is going to result in some real pain if the Chinese retaliate in various ways, especially economic ways, but it will also hurt them. In fact, it will hurt them even more.
What about the financial entanglements? And, of course, Wall Street and Goldman Sachs and Steven Mnuchin and before him, our other chief economic advisor, Gary Cohn, all these people tied to the cheap labor, slave labor crowd. Every time we try to do something against them economically, they squeal like pigs. How does the president stand up to them and say we had enough?
Well, I would point to the example of Japan. Japan has moved forward with the implementation of subsidies to help over 80 Japanese companies leave the Chinese market. That's a powerful example. Do we need to engage in that level of transference of American economic interests? I'm not sure, but at least it's an example of something we might consider. But eventually, yes, the Chinese are trying to turn the phrase economic decoupling into an offensive bad word. But it's happening. It's happening because of them. It's their fault, and it is a process that has to continue. Now, decoupling from China doesn't mean we're cutting off our nose to spite our face. We're talking about economics, money. Money flows like water. It will go to the next best place, and our business community, our business leaders are certainly smart and agile enough to find the next best place.
I just had Corey Lewandowski on my show, and he said that the Trump campaign has to make China a centerpiece, and he said it's the economy and China stupid, basically taking off the Bill Clinton theme. It's the economy stupid, adding China in there. Let's get a moment to China military expansionism, and then I'm going to get back to the virus. Their expansion in the South China Sea has been an issue of concern for a lot of people for a lot of time, but it's not covered, goes under the radar screen. How serious is that?
Okay. Almost 35 years ago, I wrote my first paper for a think tank as a young analyst on the South China Sea. And my boss ordered me to go to the Pentagon, find the person in charge of that issue, and find out why we were doing basically nothing. And I was told, and quickly shuffled out of the office, that no, we don't have an interest in the South China Sea. It doesn't matter to us. What are you bugging me about it? So that was that. I put my tail between my legs and left the office. For China, and they've basically focused on this since the late 1960s when they started developing their second-generation nuclear ballistic missile submarines. The South China Sea is the key to the future of Chinese hegemony. China cannot project power to the Indian Ocean, Persian Gulf, Africa, even the Atlantic Ocean without control of the South China Sea. China cannot protect its nuclear ballistic missile submarines that will have an increasing number of warheads over the next decade without control of the South China Sea. China cannot destroy the American-led alliance system in Asia, isolate Japan, isolate South Korea, the Philippines, without controlling the South China Sea. And China cannot control its own access to low Earth orbit, to dominate low Earth orbit, and eventually to control the Earth-Moon system without control of the South China Sea, because it has placed its only moon launcher-capable space launch base on Hainan Island, right there on the South China Sea. So this is why China wants to control the South China Sea and why the United States must prevent that. And Secretary Pompeo's announcement about 2 weeks ago that we're finally simply not going to accept China's claims and we're going to help our allies is, for me, personally, a whole new day. And thank God, thank goodness, we're standing up finally, and now we have to get to work. Now we have to help our allies. Now we have to fund a Navy that can project our power. This is it. If we are not able to deter China, then China is going to start wars. And those wars could result in a draft. So my message to all of the young people who are out, quote-unquote, peacefully protesting the police, following crypto-Marxist ideologies, very hostile to their own freedom, in 20 years, your generation is going to be facing the most profound military threat to the United States, and it's going to be on your shoulders to determine whether we're free or unfree. Let's start that work now. Make it easier for you in 20 years.
I tell you what, spot on, because until very recently we haven't done anything in the China Sea, and I know you've been writing about this for some time. You go back 35 years, Dr. Rick Fisher. That was the Reagan administration, 1985. I can do math without an abacus. So thank you for that, and thank you for continuing to bring attention to this. Right now, all of our focus on China is on the Wuhan virus, how to get out of the lab. The Chinese lied, people died. It's affected everybody in the world. They need to be held accountable for that. But in the meantime, they're slowly creeping into total military domination of the South China Sea. We've done nothing. Now we're finally starting to act. It got NATO's attention. They're sending a warship there. You're right. Either we stand up to it now, or tomorrow we're going to have a draft, right? Basically the options.
Yeah. And to all the young people listening to your show this morning, John, this is the choice. This is why elections matter, and it's your life that's on the line ultimately.
Dr. Rick Fisher, thank you for being with us. I've got to get you on here weekly as we follow this, so that as we're talking about the virus, what the Chinese have done with that, how Steve Bannon has a theory now that they knew everything about it and they released it to the West in order to flatten world's economies because they were in the tank. That's a sound theory, but nobody's talking about the issue at hand like you are. So we're going to have you back next week. Dr. Fisher, it's always great to have you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, John.